accepting our inevitable fate. The air feels heavier these days, as if the atmosphere itself is pressing down on me, whispering secrets I can't quite decipher. It's not fear I feel, but something else, something quieter, more resigned. Death comes for us all at some point, and lately I've found myself staring into its shadow, not with dread, but with a strange sense of readiness. It's as if I've already made peace with it, long before it arrives. I'm not sure how to explain this feeling, but here it goes. I grew up in a small town, nestled in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills that seem to stretch endlessly into the horizon. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, but no one truly knows you. School was a blur of awkward interactions and half-hearted attempts to fit in. I tried to make friends, but the connections I formed were fleeting, like wisps of smoke slipping through my fingers. I was always the quiet one, the observer, the kid who sat at the edge of the playground, watching others laugh and play. Deep down, I craved the kind of friendships that seemed to come so easily to everyone else. Lasting, meaningful, and full of life. But it never happened. High school was when the cracks began to show. I was grappling with my sexuality, a secret I buried so deep that it felt like a second skin. I didn't know who I was, and the fear of being discovered, or worse, rejected, was paralyzing. I had a few people I talked to, but only at school. Outside those walls, I was alone. My little brother was my only real companion, and we spent hours playing video games together, losing ourselves in pixelated worlds where everything made sense. Desperate for some kind of anchor, I joined the local church. I thought it would help me find clarity, or at least a sense of belonging. But it only made things worse. The sermons felt like daggers, each word carving deeper into my already fragile sense of self. I volunteered my time, hoping to fill the emptiness inside me, but the more I gave, the emptier I felt. The church became a prison, and I was the inmate, shackled by guilt and shame. It got so bad that I started fantasizing about death. I'd lie in bed at night, imagining how freeing it would feel to just stop, to no longer feel the weight of my own existence. I even thought about how I'd do it. Pills, maybe, or something quicker, less messy. But I was too scared to follow through. One night, in a moment of desperation, I reached out to an online forum. I didn't expect much, but someone responded, offering words of comfort and urging me to seek help. That led me to a therapist, who emailed me back and forth, trying to guide me through the darkness. But when I attempted to talk to my parents, their reaction was so dismissive, so uncomfortable, that I shut down completely. I stopped communicating with the therapist, and the darkness swallowed me whole once more. Fast forward to now. I'm 27, almost 28. I've come a long way since those days. I've accepted who I am, and I'm proud of the person I've become. I have a boyfriend, someone I met when I was 18, shortly after I moved out of my parents' house and started college. He's my rock, my safe haven. My parents don't fully accept me. They tolerate my relationship, but I know they'll never truly understand me. Still, I'm grateful they know about him, and I'm even more grateful for the support I've received from my siblings. Life hasn't been perfect. I've faced my share of professional setbacks and personal struggles, but for the most part, I'm content. I have a job, a home, and people who care about me. So why then do I feel this strange acceptance of death? It's not that I want to die. I don't. Not now. Not when I've finally found a sense of peace. But if death were to come for me, I think I'd be okay with it. There's a part of me that feels like I've already lived a lifetime, like I've seen and felt enough. The idea of leaving this world doesn't terrify me the way it once did. I think about my family, my parents, my siblings, my boyfriend. I know they'd grieve if I were gone. I love them, and I know they love me. But even that knowledge doesn't shake this eerie calm I feel when I think about death. It's as if I've already made my peace with it, as if I've already said my goodbyes in some quiet, unseen corner of my mind. Do other people feel this way? I've been deep in the trenches of depression before, and I've worked through it with a therapist. I'm not in that dark place anymore, but this feeling is different. It's not sadness or despair. It's something quieter, more contemplative. I don't feel comfortable discussing this with my family. I don't want them to worry, to think I'm slipping back into old habits. But sometimes when I'm alone, I let myself sit with this feeling. I imagine what it would be like to close my eyes and never wake up. and instead of fear, I feel relief. Maybe it's the weight of everything I've carried for so long. Maybe it's the knowledge that no matter how hard I try, I'll never fully escape the shadows of my past. Or maybe it's just the natural progression of life, the quiet acceptance that everything ends eventually. I don't know. All I know is that for now, I'm okay with it. The nights are the hardest. That's when the thoughts creep in, unbidden and unwelcome. I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I can almost feel the presence of something or someone standing in the corner of the room. It's not menacing, just there, watching, waiting. Sometimes I wonder if it's death itself, lingering in the shadows, biding its time. And instead of fear, I feel a strange sense of companionship. Like it's not here to hurt me, but to remind me that it's always been there, a silent witness to my life. I don't know what comes next, or when my time will come. But for now, I'm okay with the uncertainty. I'm okay with the quiet, and I'm okay with the knowledge that when the time comes, I'll be ready. Weirdly, I'm okay with it. My neighbor died, but I minded my own business. I live in a block apartment with my parents and my older brother in Denmark. Our neighborhood has a reputation, dark, shadowed by a history of murders, gang violence, and a school that sits uncomfortably close to a juvenile prison and a hostel. The air here feels heavier, as if the walls themselves remember the stories they've witnessed. But none of that mattered much to me, until it did. My neighbor lived alone. He was a quiet man, the kind who kept to himself but always had a nod or a smile when we crossed paths. His apartment entrance always carried the faint, skunky scent of cannabis, a smell that lingered in the hallway like a ghost. He had a garden in front of the building, a small patch of life in an otherwise grim place. He tended to it religiously, watering the plants, pruning the flowers, and chasing off anyone who dared to pluck a bloom. He was gentle, but there was a fierceness in the way he protected that garden. It was his sanctuary. A few weeks before his death, I noticed a change in him. It was summer, the kind of day where the sun felt like it was pressing down on your skin, but he was dressed in all black, hoodie pulled up, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, as if something had been slowly eating away at him. I remember stopping in my tracks, watching him shuffle down the street. For a moment, I thought about calling out, asking if he was okay, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself I was imagining things. The night it happened, my brother and I were heading to the gym. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels empty, like you're the only ones left awake. As we stepped out of the apartment, a woman, his girlfriend I think, was leaving his place, talking on the phone. Her voice was low, trembling, but I caught the words, "Honor hell cold. He's totally cold." My stomach dropped. I stopped halfway down the stairs, my brother looking back at me confused. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He shook his head, adjusting his headphones. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. But the words clung to me, like a chill I couldn't shake. 2 hours later, we were walking back home. The night had turned colder, the rain starting to fall in a slow, steady drizzle. As we approached the block, the blue lights hit us first, flashing, relentless, painting the walls in eerie, shifting patterns. Police cars lined the street, their radios crackling with static. My heart sank. "Fuck," I muttered. "I knew it. I'm not crazy." My brother looked at me, bewildered. "It's neighbor's name," I said. "He's dead." The scene was chaotic. A crowd had gathered, locals, friends, people who knew him. They were talking to an officer, their faces pale, their voices hushed. When they saw us, they pointed, and the officer approached. "You live here?" he asked. I nodded, my throat dry. "He's dead, isn't he?" The officer's eyes narrowed. "How did you know?" I told him everything. The way he'd looked those last few weeks, the woman on the phone, the words I'd heard. My brother was questioned briefly, but it was clear I was the one who'd noticed something was wrong. It was past midnight by the time they let us back into the building. The rain had soaked through my clothes, and the cold felt like it was seeping into my bones. As we passed my neighbor's door, I caught a glimpse of the scene inside. The cleanup crew was there, their shoes tracking bloody footprints across the floor. His body was still there, slumped in a way that made my stomach turn. His neck, I couldn't look away. The image burned itself into my mind. We finally made it to our apartment. My parents had slept through it all, the noise and the chaos somehow not reaching them. When we told them, their faces fell. He'd been our neighbor for as long as I could remember. He'd watched me grow up, and now he was gone. The garden is still there, though it's not the same. His friends come by sometimes to tend to it, keeping it alive in his memory. From my bedroom window, I can see it clearly. Whenever I see someone littering or plucking the flowers, I feel a surge of anger. If only they knew who had cared for it. If only they knew what had happened. I can't stop thinking about that night. What if I hadn't dismissed what I'd heard? What if I'd turned around, knocked on his door, asked if he was okay? What if I'd said something that day I saw him in the street, his face so full of pain? The questions haunt me, playing over and over in my mind like a broken record. Sometimes late at night, I swear I can still smell the faint scent of cannabis in the hallway. And when I look out at the garden, I imagine him there, tending to the flowers, his gentle hands brushing against the petals. I hope he's found peace wherever he is. I hope the garden of heaven is as beautiful as the one he left behind. R.I.P., my gentle neighbor. I am so sorry. The automated friend. I have this friend, let's call her Mara. Mara has this peculiar habit, almost ritualistic, of texting me every single day with the same 3 words. How's it going? At first it felt harmless, even endearing, but over time it became unsettling. It wasn't just the monotony of it, it was the way she said it, like she was compelled to, as if some unseen force demanded it. Her messages always arrived at the same time, 3:17 p.m., like clockwork. Not 3:16, not 3:18, always 3:17. At first I thought it was just her way of checking in, a little daily wellness ritual, but the more it went on, the more it felt off. I'd reply with something mundane like, just working, you? And she'd fire back with a robotic, that's great. No follow-up, no elaboration, just, and that's great, and then silence. The same thing. How's it going? Like a broken record, a year of this, every single day. I tried to nudge her, gently at first. You know, you could tell me about your day too, I'd say. Or, you don't have to ask me every day, we can just talk when something interesting happens. She'd respond with a vague, I'll do better, but nothing ever changed. Sometimes she'd tweak the question slightly, like, how's your day going? As if that somehow made it more meaningful. But it didn't. The conversation always fizzled out, leaving me staring at my screen, wondering why she even bothered. It wasn't just boring, it was eerie. The precision of her timing, the emptiness of her replies, the way she seemed almost programmed. I started to wonder if she was even real. Maybe she was a bot, or maybe something worse. So 2 weeks ago, I decided to outsource the conversation. I handed the reins to ChatGPT. I crafted a prompt, carefully tailoring it to mimic my tone and style. Answer all her replies in a friendly demeanor, in a text message format. Keep it light, ask a question here and there, and sound like me. Keep it under 30 words. Add emojis where appropriate. No quotation marks or bullet points, just copy and paste. And just like that, ChatGPT took over. For 2 weeks, it's been chatting with Mara, asking her about her day, tossing in the occasional emoji, keeping the conversation alive. And Mara, she hasn't noticed, not once. She still replies in that same flat, lifeless tone. But now, at least she's being forced to engage a little more. It's almost like ChatGPT is training her. Or maybe it's the other way around. The strangest part? The timing. Her messages still come at 3:17 p.m. without fail. But now, sometimes, there's a delay in her replies, like she's processing something. And once, just once, she sent a message at 3:18 p.m. I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting. It felt wrong, like a glitch in the system. I know I should feel guilty about this. I mean, I'm essentially ghosting her, letting an AI do the talking. But part of me wonders if she even cares. Maybe she's just as relieved as I am. Or maybe she's not even real. Maybe she's been an AI all along, and this whole time, we've just been 2 bots pretending to be human, trapped in an endless loop of meaningless small talk. For now, I'll keep letting ChatGPT handle it. Eventually, I'll phase her out altogether, stop replying to her generic questions, and let the conversation die. But part of me is afraid. What if she doesn't let me go? What if she keeps texting, day after day, at 3:17 p.m., forever? What if she's not just a bad texter? What if she's something else entirely? The garbage chute incident. When I was 9 years old, I lived in an old, creaky apartment building on the 4th floor. The kind of building that always seemed to groan under its own weight, with flickering hallway lights and a faint smell of mildew that no amount of cleaning could ever fully erase. My parents often tasked me with taking out the garbage, which meant tossing it down the building's garbage chute, a dark, metal-lined tunnel that seemed to stretch endlessly into the bowels of the building. I hated it. The chute always made this low, guttural rumble as garbage tumbled down, like the building itself was alive and digesting its waste. One day I discovered a strange fascination with fire. I'd light small pieces of paper, receipts, napkins, whatever I could find, and drop them down the chute, watching the flames flicker and dance as they fell into the abyss. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. I always made sure the fire went out before it disappeared into the darkness. At least I thought I did. One afternoon, I found an empty toilet paper roll, the kind with that last stubborn sheet glued to the cardboard. For some reason, I decided to light it. I held the flame to the edge, watching as it caught fire, the orange glow spreading quickly. I dropped it into the chute and leaned in, watching it fall. But this time, the flame didn't go out. It clung to the cardboard, burning brighter and brighter as it disappeared into the shadows. A cold knot of panic tightened in my stomach. Maybe it'll go out by itself, I thought, trying to convince myself. I waited a few seconds, but the faint smell of smoke began to creep up the chute, acrid and sharp. I slammed the chute door shut and bolted back to my apartment, my heart pounding. 2 minutes later, the fire alarm blared through the building, a shrill, ear-splitting sound that sent everyone into a panic. I froze in the living room, my parents rushing to the balcony to see what was happening. Thick black smoke was billowing out of the garbage room on the ground floor. My dad turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "Did you do something?" he asked, his voice low and suspicious. I shook my head, my throat too dry to speak. "No," I managed to croak. "I didn't do anything." The fire department arrived quickly, their sirens wailing like banshees. Everyone in the building was evacuated, standing in clusters on the sidewalk, wrapped in blankets and staring up at the smoke pouring from the garbage room. I stayed close to my parents, my hands trembling. The firefighters emerged after what felt like hours, their faces grim. "Looks like it started in the garbage room," one of them said. "Probably a cigarette butt. Someone must have flicked it down the chute." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The guilt gnawed at me for months. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining the flames spreading, the building collapsing, people screaming. I never told a soul. Years later, long after we'd moved out of that building, I found myself at a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where the air smells like stale beer and regret. I struck up a conversation with a woman sitting next to me, her eyes glassy and her words slightly slurred. We got to talking about where we'd grown up, and when I mentioned the old apartment building, her face lit up with recognition. "Oh, I lived there too," she said, taking a long sip of her drink. "You remember that garbage room fire?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I remember." She leaned in closer, her breath smelling of whiskey. "They blamed my ex for that, you know. Said he was always smoking in the apartment and throwing his cigarette butts down the chute. He got charged for it, lost his job, got kicked out of the building. It ruined him." She paused, her eyes distant. "He's dead now. Drank himself to death after all that. Liver disease." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. "I didn't know," I stammered. She waved a hand dismissively, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Yeah, well, life's a bitch, huh?" She took another swig of her drink, her laughter growing louder, almost hysterical. "You know what's funny? I started drinking too much after that. Guess it runs in the family." I didn't know what to say. The guilt I'd buried for so long came rushing back, heavier than ever. I wanted to tell her the truth, to confess, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a laugh, trying to match her tone. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. "Life's a bitch." We sat there for a while, drinking in silence, the weight of the past hanging between us like a ghost. And as I left the bar that night, the image of the burning toilet paper roll flashed in my mind, the flames twisting and writhing like something alive. I couldn't shake the feeling that the fire had never really gone out, that it was still burning somewhere, deep in the shadows, waiting to consume everything in its path. The Garden of Frozen Things. I'm 16 years old and I'm terrified of myself. Not the kind of fear that makes you jump at shadows or avoid dark alleys. No, this is worse. This is the kind of fear that crawls under your skin and nests there, whispering to you in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. It's the fear of what I've done, what I'm capable of, and what I might do next. I've always been sick in the head. At least that's what I tell myself. I don't remember a time when I wasn't drawn to the darker corners of the world, to the things that make most people look away. When I was a kid, it started small, harmless almost. I'd pull the wings off flies, not because I enjoyed it, but because I was curious. What would happen if I did? Would it still try to fly? Would it even notice? But curiosity soon gave way to something else, something colder and more deliberate. I remember the first time I killed something bigger than an insect. I was 8 years old and I found a baby rabbit in the garden. It was small and trembling, its eyes still closed, nestled in a shallow burrow. I didn't think about what I was doing, I just acted. I stomped on it, hard. The sound it made was soft, almost imperceptible, but it stayed with me. I didn't feel anything at first. No guilt, no remorse, just a strange, hollow satisfaction. The next morning, I went back to the garden and found the burrow filled with frost, the tiny bodies of the other rabbits frozen solid. It was as if the earth itself had turned against them, punishing them for my sin. As I grew older, the acts became more calculated. I started to plan, to think things through. I'd spend hours in the woods, watching the animals, learning their habits. I wanted to see how far I could push them, how much they could endure. One day, I coated an acorn in a sticky, toxic substance I'd concocted from household chemicals. I left it on the pavement near a chipmunk's nest and waited. It didn't take long for the creature to find it, to nibble at the poisoned treat. I watched as it began to choke, its tiny body convulsing on the ground. It took hours to die, and I stayed there the whole time, fascinated by the way its life slowly drained away. When it was finally over, I felt nothing. Just emptiness. The guilt comes in waves now. Some days, it's unbearable. I'll wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the images of what I've done flashing behind my eyes. I'll see the frozen rabbits, the suffocating chipmunk, the countless other creatures I've hurt or killed. I'll feel the weight of their lives pressing down on me, crushing me beneath the enormity of my own cruelty. But other days, I feel nothing at all. It's like there's a void inside me, a black hole where my conscience should be. And that's what scares me the most. I was taught to manipulate, to twist people's emotions to get what I wanted. I'm sorry to the people I've used, the ones I've hurt without a second thought. I'm not going to sit here and tell you some sob story about how I was abused or neglected as a child. I had my reasons for doing what I did, but they don't excuse me. Nothing can excuse me. I am a monster, I know that, and yet I still feel empathy sometimes. It's there, buried deep beneath the layers of darkness, but it's faint like a distant echo. I'm afraid of what will happen when it fades completely. What will I do then? Who will I hurt? I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to be this way. But I can't escape the truth. I am broken, irreparably so. My heart aches with the weight of what I've done, but it's not enough. It will never be enough. I don't deserve pity or forgiveness. I don't deserve anything but the cold, unyielding judgment of the world. But still, I try. Every day, I fight against the darkness inside me. I strive to be kinder, to be better. I don't know if it's possible, if someone like me can ever truly change. But I have to believe it is. I have to believe that there's still a chance, no matter how small, that I can become something other than the monster I see in the mirror. The garden where I killed those rabbits is still there, untouched and overgrown. Sometimes I go back and stand among the weeds, staring at the spot where the burrow used to be. The ground is hard and unyielding, as if it remembers what I did. I can almost hear the whispers of the frozen things beneath the soil, their voices soft and accusing. They remind me of who I am, of what I've done, and they remind me that no matter how far I run, I can never escape myself. The weight of betrayal. I never thought my first anxiety attack would come from them. Not from the stress of work, not from the shadows of my own mind, but from the very people I called my friends. The ones who had once been my sanctuary, my laughter in the chaos, my light in the dark. I used to believe that friendship was sacred, a bond forged in loyalty, trust, and shared moments that felt like they could defy time itself. But I was wrong, so terribly wrong. That night, the air felt heavier than usual, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable collapse. My hands trembled uncontrollably, my fingers clawing at my chest as if I could physically tear out the pain that was consuming me. My heart pounded like a war drum, each beat echoing in my ears, a deafening reminder that I was still alive, even though I felt like I was dying. The room around me seemed to warp and twist, the walls closing in, the shadows stretching longer and darker, as though they were alive and feeding on my despair. I couldn't breathe. Each gasp felt like inhaling shards of glass, sharp and unforgiving. My mind spiraled into a chaos I couldn't control, a storm of thoughts that tore through me like a hurricane. And at the center of it all was him, my boyfriend, the person I loved, the person I trusted, the one who had promised to stand by me, to see me, to know me, to fight for me. He stood there now, his eyes cold and distant, looking at me as if I were a stranger, as if the 2 years we had built together, the late-night conversations, the whispered I love yous, the moments of vulnerability and connection, meant nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was them, my so-called friends. They had done this. Their voices, once so familiar and comforting, now echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, twisting my words, planting seeds of doubt, and turning my love into something ugly in his eyes. They had poisoned him against me, and he had listened. That was what broke me the most. Not just their betrayal, but his willingness to believe them. His hesitation, that flicker of doubt in his eyes as he looked at me, as if he no longer knew who I was. Do you know what it feels like to look into the eyes of someone you love and see hesitation? To watch the cracks form in something you thought was unshakable? It's like standing in the middle of a burning house, watching the flames consume everything you've ever known, everything you've ever loved. You want to scream, to run, to do something, anything, to stop it. But the smoke is already in your lungs, choking you, suffocating you, and all you can do is stand there, paralyzed, as your world crumbles around you. I wanted to tell him, please, don't let them do this to us. I wanted to remind him of every moment we had shared, every laugh, every tear, every promise. I wanted to shake him, to make him see me, to make him remember what we had. But the words wouldn't come. All I could do was gasp for air, my body trembling as the weight of his betrayal pressed down on me, crushing me beneath its unbearable heaviness. And then there were the voices. Their voices. They lingered in the back of my mind, a constant, insidious whisper that I couldn't escape. You're not enough. You never were. He never loved you. They never cared about you. Over and over, the words repeated, each one a dagger to my already shattered heart. I tried to silence them, to push them away, but they only grew louder, more persistent, until they were all I could hear. I felt myself drowning, pulled under by a current of pain and betrayal that I couldn't fight. And instead of reaching out to save me, he stood on the shore, watching, hesitating. That hesitation, that moment of uncertainty, was what shattered me completely. Because love should be certain. Love should be louder than lies. Love should be stronger than the people who want to destroy it. But at that moment, my love wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, numb and disconnected from the world around me. The betrayal lingered like a shadow, always just out of sight, but never out of mind. I replayed the moments in my head, over and over, searching for something, anything, that could explain how it had all gone so wrong. But there were no answers, only the hollow ache of what had been lost. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them for what they did, or him, or myself. The pain is still there, a constant gnawing presence that I can't seem to escape. But I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to heal, to rebuild, to find a way to move forward. It's not easy. Some days it feels impossible, but I keep going because what else can I do?